All right, welcome to this explainer. Let's just jump right in, shall we? Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating breakdown from Expert on Hire about a reality literally every business faces. Hiring exceptional talent is arguably one of the most exciting and absolutely critical decisions any organization makes, right? It's the lifeblood of a growing business. You bring in a new hire, and bam, with them comes fresh ideas, deep technical expertise, and entirely new perspectives that can genuinely shift the trajectory of a project. But here is the hard truth that we're going to unpack today. Hiring alone does not guarantee long-term success. Sure, strategic hiring opens the door. It starts the journey. But actually, it's the culture that determines just how far an organization can go. So let's kick things off with a bit of a provocative question. Why do outstanding candidates fail? Seriously, think about it. You've probably seen it happen, or maybe you've even experienced it yourself. An organization spends months recruiting this top-tier candidate. I mean, their resume is flawless. Their technical skills are completely off the charts. But fast forward 6 months, and they're struggling. They're disengaged. Or worse, they're already heading out the door. Organizations that rely exclusively on the recruitment phase are constantly left scratching their heads, wondering why these rockstar candidates fail to deliver the expected results. And the answer pretty much shatters the myth that talent alone equals success. In almost every single case, the challenge isn't the talent. The challenge is the culture. It really comes down to what a person brings versus what an organization actually provides. On an individual level, every new hire brings raw talent, their unique knowledge, their past experience, creativity, specific problem-solving skills. That is their individual capability. But the true value of all that individual talent, that's only ever realized when it's combined into a collective excellence. They need to be dropped into an environment that actively encourages continuous learning, seamless collaboration, and bold innovation. Because let's be real, you just cannot transform raw individual strengths into true organization-wide capability without that supportive environment. It's just not going to happen. To really wrap our heads around this, we need to redefine culture altogether. Forget the glossy mission statements hanging in the lobby. Those are, well, they're just words on a wall. True culture is a practical, everyday operational reality. It's reflected in the daily, totally unglamorous way people communicate with each other. It's how a team reacts when a server crashes at 2 a.m. or a project goes completely off the rails. How do they solve problems? How do they make decisions when the boss isn't in the room? And most importantly, how do they support one another? We really have to shift our mindset away from seeing culture as this vague HR buzzword and start seeing it as the literal operating system of a business. So, what does that operating system look like when it's functioning perfectly? Well, it looks like open communication, where people actually aren't afraid to speak up. It means continuous learning and knowledge sharing, so a win for one person instantly becomes a win for the whole team. It includes mutual respect, relentless innovation, deep accountability, seamless collaboration, and customer-focused thinking. Now, why are these specific traits so absolutely crucial? Because these aren't just nice to have, warm and fuzzy concepts. They are non-negotiable operational requirements. They're what enable teams to perform consistently, especially during periods of rapid, chaotic change. When the pressure is on, a team with these qualities will hold together, while a team without them, they'll just fracture. And that leads us to a really core concept here, the multiplier effect. Culture doesn't just add to talent, it multiplies it. Think of talent as a baseline number. One talented employee can absolutely make a huge difference. They can write great code, design a beautiful product, close a massive deal, for sure. But when you take a group of talented individuals and connect them with a strong culture built on trust, you don't just get addition, you get multiplication. A team connected by trust can literally transform an entire organization. Culture is that magic multiplier that takes individual brilliance and turns it into an unstoppable collective force. Let's unpack the actual mechanics of this multiplier effect. Like, how does it work on a random Tuesday afternoon in the office? Well, in an environment of trust, teams share ideas freely without that lingering fear of being shot down. They solve complex problems together rather than pointing fingers at each other. And this next one is huge. They learn from mistakes. Actually, think about that for a second. In a bad culture, mistakes are hidden, right? But in a great culture, they are dissected and learned from. They improve processes continuously, deliver higher quality products, and support business innovation. This is exactly how a strong culture allows those individual strengths we talked about earlier to evolve into widespread, deeply rooted collective capability. Okay, but what happens when we get this wrong? We need to talk about the stakes here, which brings us to the very real cost of ignoring culture. As the explainer points out, organizations often become hyper-fixated on the recruitment process. They'll spend vast amounts of time and resources finding the absolute perfect candidate, but they completely overlook the environment that this new employee is about to enter. When you ignore the culture, you are essentially planting a premium, incredibly expensive seed in toxic soil. And the result? Even the most highly skilled professionals, veterans of their industry, will inevitably struggle. Let's look at the actual fallout of that. When culture is ignored, collaboration plummets, and engagement just flatlines. People just start clocking in and clocking out. What follows is a brutal domino effect. Reduced productivity leads to high turnover, which forces you to restart the massive expense of hiring all over again. You get slower innovation, knowledge silos where departments just refuse to share information with each other, massive communication gaps, and ultimately totally inconsistent customer experiences. The whole shebang. All of this translates directly to lost time, drastically increased hiring costs, and severely reduced business performance. Now, let's flip that and see how things build positively when an organization actually gets it right. High-performing organizations recognize that culture influences literally every metric. On one hand, it drastically improves things like employee retention, engineering quality, and customer satisfaction. But simultaneously, it drives the broader engine of the company. It fuels leadership development, smooths out operational efficiency, builds profound organizational resilience, and leads directly to sustainable business growth. Culture touches absolutely everything, from the lines of code being written right down to the customer receiving the final product. Which brings us to what I consider an absolute mic drop moment from the source material. Culture is not an HR initiative. It is a strategic business asset. I mean, wow. Let that paradigm shift sink in for a second. For decades, culture was basically relegated to the human resources department as some side project involving trust falls and free office snacks. Well, not anymore. It is a measurable, powerful, strategic business asset that absolutely dictates whether your company will lead the market or fall behind. So the big question is, how do we actually bridge this gap? If hiring starts the journey, but culture dictates the success, how in the world do we align them? Well, this is where we look at the ExpertOnHire solution, bridging skills and values. ExpertOnHire acts as a catalyst here. They believe that successful hiring has to go way, way beyond simply matching technical skills with a bulleted list of job requirements. Whether they're working with nimble startups, growing SMEs, or massive enterprises, their goal is to identify professionals who possess not just the technical chops, but the core values and collaborative mindset that align with long-term organizational success. And here is how that methodology actually works in practice. First, they utilize AI-assisted talent matching to find the right baseline fit. But, and this is key, they don't stop there. They bring in verified technical experts and conduct portfolio-based candidate evaluations to see what candidates have actually built in the real world. They use structured technical assessments and practical skill validation. What this highly structured approach does is ensure that the candidates aren't just good on paper, It proves they can truly collaborate, learn, and fit into a high-trust culture. And for the business, that means way faster hiring decisions and a drastically reduced hiring risk. This brings us to what's essentially the ultimate blueprint for success. Strong organizations follow this continuous, incredibly powerful cycle. It all starts with strategic hiring, bringing the right talent through the door using the methods we just discussed. Then, that talent immediately encounters your shared values, forming a rock-solid cultural foundation. That foundation naturally breeds collaboration and continuous learning, which in turn unlocks constant innovation. That innovation is the absolute hallmark of high-performing teams capable of extraordinary customer success. And all of that culminates in sustainable business growth. Culture is the glue that strengthens every single stage of this journey. And that brings us to our final point, and really the most important takeaway of this entire explainer. Hiring introduces talent, but ultimately, it's culture that transforms that talent into lasting success. ExpertOnHire is dedicated to starting this vital journey off right, with their promise of smooth hiring, no noise. They find the verified technical talent so you can focus on building the environment where that talent will actually thrive. So, I'm going to leave you with this question to think about. If you brought the greatest talent in the world into your organization tomorrow, is your culture strong enough to turn their individual brilliance into lasting success? Thanks so much for joining us and keep learning.